my mind is made up.
Hey guys, this is Eric Kyle, publisher of Latitudes and Attitudes magazine.
And I'm David Levesque, editor of Latitudes and Attitudes, and welcome to Three Sheets, our podcast where we chill and chat with individuals making a difference in the cruising lifestyle.
Each episode, we'll dive into all things cruising related and bring you some of the most influential characters out there. So sit back, grab your favorite bottle, light them if you got them, and enjoy the adventure. Hey guys, Eric Kyle here, publisher of Latitudes and Attitudes magazine, and I'm happy to kick off our initial podcast talking with the one and only former founder and publisher of Latitudes and Attitudes, Bob Bitchin. Bob, how are you today, sir?
Bitchin.
It is always a pleasure to see you, my friend, and I can't express my gratitude enough for allowing us to help continue on the legacy of Latitudes and Attitudes. Just wanted to check in with you, brother. How are you today, and how's everything else in your world?
Well, hang on a second. Before we get going on this, Bitchin, really? Bitchin? Is that your real last name, dude?
You know what? That's what they started calling me in the 60s, and I can't remember what happened in the 60s. So yeah, I guess, I mean, that's the only name I've used since the 60s. Of course, I was born in the 40s. I don't remember what I did in the first 20 years because of the 60s. And so, you know.
So how did the name Bob Bitchin come about?
It was really pretty easy. I was riding with a motorcycle club, and my club name was Bob Bitchin.
Okay.
And on the back of my cutoff, it said Bob Bitchin. And I was working out at Gold's Gym in Santa Monica when there was only one Gold's Gym. And Tommy Chong was working out there too at the same time. This is like 19...
Like Cheech and Chong, Tommy Chong?
Yeah. And but it was before they were Cheech and Chong. It was before they did their first album. And he came to me one day and he said, you know, we're going to do this thing. Let's make a dope deal on our comedy album. He says, Bob Bitchin would be a great name. I said, it's not really my name. It's my club name. Just go ahead. You know, I mean, I figured as soon as I stopped riding with the club, it would be dead anyway. And here we are 50 years later, stuck with the name.
Why was it?
They made it too famous.
Bob, why was it your club name?
Because I was bitching.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, you know, you got to. We're talking the '60s in California. That's bitching, man. It's just bitching. That's, you know. So that's where it came from.
Now that we got that settled, Bob, you've had some pretty extensive service in the publishing world. All the way back to the 60s and 70s. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of what Bob Bitchin has been doing to publish magazines and keep people engaged in great editorial content?
I don't know about that, but I can tell you that the way it happened was when I was working with Evel Knievel. I was just traveling companion bodyguard, and everybody I met through him was rich, and they were all in publishing. Guccione, Hefner, Flint. I mean, that were the people that was following him, and they were all filthy rich. So after he fell in the canyon and retired, I had to do something. So I had never set foot in a publishing office at that time. I had never written a story at that time. And I started Biker News, which was a tabloid, right after I left him, and made it for a year, actually made it a profit in a year, and then I sold it to Cycle News, which was my competition. I have a habit of building a business and selling it to my competition. Yeah, you know about that, right?
Just a little bit.
So that turned into, over the years, turned into Biker Magazine, which became the second largest circulation motorcycle magazine in the country. And in 1980, part of our magazine was a thing we covered tattoos, tattoo flash, because all bikers had tattoos. So then I realized there was no tattoo magazine, so it's time to start Tattoo Magazine. It got even bigger than the motorcycle magazine, and I didn't know it because I started it in 1980, but tattoos were about to blow up. And in 1986, I sold my bike magazine and tattoo magazine to my competition, Easy Rider. And then I got on my boat and took off and sailed around the world. The owner of Easy Rider, Joe Teresi, it's really funny because when I came back 10 years later, And I'm sitting in his office telling him I want to start a boating magazine like Easy Rider. And I went to him to start it. I was going to do it for him. And he came up with this logical thing that really made sense. Boaters do not go to liquor stores to buy their magazines. Bikers do. So biker magazines sold crazily in liquor stores, but a boating magazine wouldn't do too well in a liquor store. And so he didn't want to do it. I figured I knew better. So I started it. Started it with two friends of mine, Keith Ball, who was the editor of Easy Rider for 30 years. He's been a friend of mine for 47 years. And Bob Clark, who started Street Chopper, Chopper Guide, Chopper Magazine. I mean, he started all of those. And they were my best friends. So they both came in, they kicked in a little bit. We started the magazine. At the end of the second year, it was working. And I bought my partners out. And then until I found a sucker to buy it some 27 years later, I kept doing it.
Well, Bob, there's a pretty big gap in time here between when you became a sailor and Biker Magazine. So how do you go from that one extreme, riding a Harley, having a bunch of tattoos, being involved in whatever you were involved in at that time, to doing something like sailing? How did that transition happen?
I got to tell you, tattoos fit into both worlds.
Yes.
I mean, see, like this is a sailing ship right here. So, but no, it really was pretty simple. I had me and my editor, Degenerate Jim, we had ridden down to this coffee shop, Captain Ahab's down at the marina, to have lunch one day because they had prettier waitresses than they had at Mama Rose's. So we decided to go down there. And afterwards, we walked out onto the dock, and there was a guy putting a for sale sign on a Cal 28. And I had some money in my pocket, and what do you want for it? He said, 10 grand. I'll give you 5. I'll take 7. And literally, we did the deal talking from the fence to the dock. And then he came down and let me in. And I looked at the boat. I knew nothing about boats. You had
never been on a sailboat at that point. Why did you go? Why did you even go down to the docks to check out the boat?
We were eating
Why did
lunch
you buy
there,
the boat?
We stepped out the side door instead of the front door, and that was on the dock. And that's when I saw the boat. And I'm like, this could be fun. So I bought the boat. And I said, but just one thing, you got to give me at least 5 lessons. And he said, I can't. I said, why not? I'm leaving in 3 days on the boat on the end of the dock for Hawaii. So I said, okay, you got to give me 3 lessons. He said, I can give you 2 lessons because I'm leaving on the 3rd day. He gave me 2 lessons. After that, every day at 2 o'clock, I'd kidnap Degenerate Jim, my editor, and I'd say, come on, dude, we're leaving. We'd go down to the docks, we'd get on the boat, I'd back it out with the motor, and I'd motor out of the harbor so nobody could see me being stupid. And I'd go out to where nobody could see me. And I'd put up the sails and basically taught myself how to sail. We had an area where these oil tankers would be unloading right down from us about 3-4 miles. And they had these 50-foot buoys that they would tie up to. So I'd go to those buoys when there was no ship there, and I taught myself how to come up to it and tie to it. So when I pulled into a dock, I wouldn't look funny, because that's the last thing I wanted to do was look funny. So, I mean, as you can tell by the looks, it never worked. I still look funny, but yeah. And then at the time I was riding with a club that was pretty well known down here. And so my buddies started to come out with me on the boat. Now that was funny. When you put on a Cal 28, you put about a half a dozen 6-foot, 300-pound tattooed bikers with their boots and their cutoffs and their old ladies who are basically topless by the time you leave the dock. Every time we'd go by the yacht club, they'd be putting up the, and I was blackballed from that yacht club. And then I fixed that boat. I sold it. I got a bigger one. I fixed that boat. I sold it. I got a bigger one. My 8th boat was the Lost Soul, which was a 68-foot catch, which I bought as a wreck, fixed it up, and then sailed around the world on it. When I came back, they sent the yacht club sent a committee over to see if I would join right after I started the magazine. They, come on, guy, come on. I said, but you told me you didn't want me. What's up? So
your inspiration in starting Latitudes and Attitudes magazine was you cruising around the world in Lost Soul.
My inspiration for starting the magazine was that I didn't feel that there was a magazine out there for me. All the boating magazines were written for, it looked like rich people who had a skipper walking behind them. And everybody I knew worked on their own boat. Everybody I knew, worked really hard for their boat bucks. And it wasn't like it was pictured when you go to at that time, if you went to a boat show, they were catering to the wealthy. They were, if you walked by in shorts and a dirty t-shirt, they didn't want you to stop and talk to them. But if you had on the white pants and the blue blazer and a skipper standing behind you, then they're, come on in, buy something and make it expensive. What I realized was that the majority of the boating audience was like me. The majority, everybody I met at the marina was working on their own boat. There were 2 or 3 big boats that had, wealthy owners that hired people, but 9 times out of 10, everybody that was on their boat that I met was like me. And that's what I designed Latitudes and Attitudes about, for people who actually worked on their own boats, sailed their own boats. And that's what it is. We do allow rich people to read it, but not too many.
You know what, Bob, I've known you for 14, 15 years, and I can't imagine you in white pants and a blue blazer. That's a frightening thought.
I never had white pants, but I borrowed a blue blazer once because I had to speak at the New York Yacht Club, and they wouldn't let me in without it.
It's a good reason.
It didn't fit.
So just to be clear about when you started Latitudes and Attitudes, you had just gotten back from sailing around the world, or was this before you left?
No. When I left, I just sold my other magazines, and I was glad to go. Mm-hmm. And basically I retired. I was 48 years old, and I said, I'm retired. I'm going to go sail around the world, and then I can die, sail off into the sunset and die. When I got back, I realized you don't die when you come back. You have to do something when you get back. That's what most people don't realize. Oh, I'm going to sail around the world. I'm going to sail off into the sunset. Well, that only takes 3, 4 years, 5 years. If you're lucky, 10 years like me. But I left at 48, so I would have had to die at 58. I didn't want to do that. So, and here I am now in my 80th year, and I'm still kicking. Who thought, who knew?
No, there's lots of bookies that lost plenty of money on that bet.
Yeah.
The beautiful young lady that accompanied you on this trip later became your wife.
Yeah, she was my bartender at the Portofino. We knew each other for 4 years. We were both dating other people, and we were good friends. And one day she didn't have a date and I didn't have a date, and I was going to Catalina. I said, you want to go? She said, yeah. And the next week I said, you want to go to the islands? And she said, yeah, thinking I meant Catalina. This time I meant Tahiti. It almost didn't work, though, because her dad, who she did not meet until she was 27, her real father, her birth father, turned out to have built his own 45-foot steel schooner, junk rigged, and lived on it for 27 years in the Caribbean. And just before I asked her to go sailing, it was the first time she'd ever been out on a sailboat too. She went and sailed with her father for about a month. And he is the one that told her, by the way, don't get on the boat with that guy. He's got tattoos, and no, don't do it. She didn't.
Well, yeah, and she thankfully didn't listen to her father. As much has been documented about you and Jody's relationships over the years. Yep. Bob, so, Captain Ron, we're big fans of Captain Ron, right?
Right.
He always said, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen out there. So I've heard a lot of your stories. Try to give us a couple quick ones real quick about what's happened to you out there.
Well, coming from exactly what you just talked about, one of the funniest things I ever had was I was sailing in Hawaii, and my cell phone rang, and I pick it up, and it's Mike Stinson, who I just had lunch with yesterday, by the way. And he was a skipper on a friend of mine's boat who had just sold it to Captain Ron. Kurt Russell had just bought his boat. Yeah, it was a 78-foot power boat, and he was taking it up to Seattle because his son was going to be playing hockey up there, and he wanted to have a place to stay, so he figured he'd buy a boat. So he hired Mike Stinson, who was Dave Parker's skipper, who he bought the boat from, who was a friend of mine. And they were taking it up the coast, and Mike walked into the salon, and there was a copy of Latitudes and Attitudes on the table. And he turned to Kurt and he said, hey, a buddy of mine does that. And Kurt Russell said, that's the reason I wanted to get a boat, was reading that magazine. So Mike called me and puts me on the phone with him. And the first thing I asked him is, dude, I want to interview you. He said, oh, I don't know enough about boats. I just bought this one. I said, no, not you, Captain Ron. And he says, oh no, that was just such a little flake movie. It's not one of his favorite movies. In fact, if you look at where he lists the movies he likes, it's not on the list.
Yeah. Well, you've had,
as
I mean, you've had a lot of adventures of your own out there. I've heard you tell some stories about big waves here and, you know, meeting kings and stuff like that over the years.
Princes who are now sultans.
Princess sultans. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen out there. Give us a couple right now.
Well, I mean, how long do you want? I mean, I can tell you about the Hawaii wave. That was the big one.
Yeah.
Jody and I had been sailing in Hawaii for about, we'd been there about 3 months. We came up from the South Pacific and we were having a really good time, but this storm had blown in. And in Hawaii, it's kind of weird because on the islands, if it's blowing 35, 40 knots, then in the channels, it's blowing 60, 65 knots because they have these little 12,000 foot peaks, Mauna Loa, Mauna Kea. And so it gets very difficult to cross a channel in Hawaii. Hawaii is not good sailing. Hawaii, the wind is always blowing in one direction from the big island down to Kauai. And so it's easy to go from the big island down, but it's almost impossible to go from Kauai to the big island because it's directly against the wind. So Hawaii is not good sailing. But we had been there for a while. The storm was blowing. We tucked in behind a cliff on Lanai for a while, watched every Star Wars movie we had, waiting for the storm to end. It didn't. So then we took off, went up, tucked in behind Haleakala on Maui, and waited for the next day. And the weather thing said the wind's going to clock around. So instead of being on our stern at 55 knots, if we waited a day, it would be on our nose at 35 knots. Now, anybody got any input here? I took the 55 downwind. I'd much rather have 55 behind me than 35 in front of me. Mm-hmm. So that next morning at 5 a.m, why is it we leave at 5 a.m? I have no friggin' idea. But the next morning at 5 a.m, triple reef head sail, a handkerchief of a mainsail, no mizzen, no staysail, and my boat's 42 tons. It's pretty heavy. We head out into the channel, the Ale Nui Halahala. The waves are about 30 feet. The winds are blowing about 50 to 60. We're quartering the seas. So we're quartering the seas. They're coming from behind us and we're surfing down at 11 to 13 knots. Wow. And then when we coast down the back of the wave, it slows us down to 5 or 6 knots, and then up to 11 to 13. Autopilot could not handle it. So Jody would steer for 10 minutes and then I'd steer for an hour. And then she'd relieve me so I could go relieve myself and then go back, you know. So we're about 8 miles out and I'm on the wheel. I got this big destroyer wheel. And all of a sudden the sails started to flop. And I'm like, how can the sail be flopping in 50 knots of wind? And I turned and I looked behind me and there's an 80-foot wall of water and it's clear at the top. 2 30-foot waves had crossed, making a 50-foot wave. And then in front of it was a 30-foot valley that we were in. And so looking up, this is about to break because it's crystal clear at the top. I'm very safety conscious, but I never wear a harness. All my crew has to wear a harness. I don't because I own the boat. I can do what I want. Captains can't be washed overboard. I read that somewhere. Anyway, so I'm without a harness. I got my arm hooked through the wheel, literally holding on like this. The boat starts going up the face of the wave. There's more water on this side than there is on this side, so the boat starts to heel like this. Then when we get up high enough, the wind hits the sail. Does it like this, and then the wave broke. Does it like this. So now we augured in, the mast goes underwater. I'm hanging from the wheel in here. The wave breaks over like this, and then the boat does what it's supposed to do. The keel catches it, and it just pops it back up again. When it pops it back up, I back up, and I'm on the wheel, and I'm looking forward, and the water coming out of the sail the sun's shining and it looks like Niagara Falls, which you know about. That's where you're from. And so I looked down at Jody and said, Jody, you got to see this. And Jody's down there looking like this. It was then that I came up with the saying, attitude is the difference between an ordeal and an adventure. Jody came up with the saying, sometimes it's just an ordeal.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's one of those moments where first you say it, then you do it, if you know what I'm talking about.
yeah, yes, yeah. It was, and here's the funny thing: we were over rigged. We had double rigged. We were 13 stays per mast. We had lower shrouds, upper shrouds, forward shrouds, aft shrouds. We really over rigged it. When we got into the Big Island, we realized that we had lost the lower aft shroud on the main.
Wow.
When it it was just gone. So
Yeah,
there's some fun
I,
out there.
I just want to throw this out there because now that we've successfully scared the heck out of everybody out there who's listening to this and thinking to themselves, I'm never going to go out there and do this. I noticed that when I started reading Latitudes and Attitudes and became a big fan of what it is that you're doing there, I found inspiration from all the stories, from all the people that were writing about their adventures around the globe. And it really encouraged me to want to cast the lines off and just go. Just make it happen. And I think that's been pretty much the theme of your message to your readers in Latitudes and Attitudes for decades, is just go make it happen. Just forget about all the things you're worried about. Forget about all the things that you're afraid of. So what's the difference between what happened in your day and what's happening now? How do we settle that to get people to go out and go sailing? And
it's pretty simple, really. There are people who wouldn't, they think we're absolutely nuts to go out in water that is deeper than our waist. And you will never convince them. They will never do it. They don't want to. And then there are people like us that I see something like that as an adventure. I know when I untie my dock lines, if I'm only sailing to Catalina, 24 miles away, before I come back and retie my dock lines, I'm going to have an experience that I'll remember the rest of my life. Every time I leave, I have some kind of an experience. And I don't know how to explain this, but you get to where when you see a storm in the distance and you know you're going to sail into it, you get excited. You don't get scared. In fact, and it's not me, but Jody's the same way. We don't get fear because when you see the storm, you're so busy getting ready for it, making sure everything's lashed down, making sure you got the right amount of sail up there, making sure everything down below is secure before you get into the storm. So you're busy. The storm gets there and you're excited because it's fun when the storm's going on. You're blowing around and you're checking things and you're hanging onto the wheel, and it could take 2 hours or 2 days, but that whole time is exciting. Now, people who watch it on television can never feel what you feel when you come out of that storm, as you start to see a little bit of light in front of you and the seas start to subside. And all of a sudden you realize that you did it. You sailed through this storm. You can't get that feeling sitting in an easy chair watching TV. You can't get it in a movie theater or reading a book. You have to get on the boat and go out there, chase the dragon. Once you kiss the dragon, no, you kissed the maiden, you killed the dragon. One of the two. Yeah. You kiss the dragon, kill the maiden. No, backwards. So
you know what, Bob? There's a whole lot of life metaphors in there. Are pretty amazing, actually, when you think about it. Just riding the storm out, thanks to REO Speedwagon, they made a song about it, right? You know what? I mean, so we've talked a lot about, Bob. You started this magazine, inspired a lot of people. Where are things going at now? We've also talked about the younger audiences that are getting out there cruising. So last fall in Annapolis, we had the pleasure of getting involved in the Young Cruiser Association International Cruiser Awards, right?
That was fun.
And that was a lot of fun, wasn't it? And Latitudes and Attitudes sponsored the best YouTube channel, which, Parley Revival Boys won that. And it's really cool because they just did a crossing from Puerto Vallarta out to the Marquesas, and they did a live YouTube broadcast from crossing the equator, right from the equator. And it was super cool, thanks to the modern technology that's out there right now. But so back in Annapolis, you were there. Lynn Party was there. You guys both presented awards, and you guys were recognized and largely regarded as the OGs of cruising, right? The original gangsters of cruising. And I don't
thought
know,
that's it for old goats.
something like that. I guess I'm kind of curious. I mean, how's it feel to be? I mean, I know you told me before how it feels to be old, but I mean, how's it feel to kind of be that, in that company with Lynn, first of all, to be considered like the original gangsters of cruising?
Well, what's funny is Lynn and I are the same age. And I've been to her house in New Zealand. She was just in our house a month ago up here. We've been friends for, God, 30 something years, ever since we were both in the same hurricane in Cabo San Lucas. I think it was 1983. And that's where I first met Lynn and Larry. And we've been friends ever since. I'll tell you a really funny, quick story. We were doing one of our share of the sales in New Zealand. And Lynn and Larry lived on this little island, Kawau Island, and they invited us to come over for a party. We had 6 boats with, I think we had about 50 people. We had Eric Stone with us. We had Kyle Rife playing the guitar with him. And so we got to their house and they set up the band in the living room. They set up a barbecue outside. They invited all their neighbors from the island, all 3 of them, and they came over. We had one of the best parties you could imagine. And then the next day, this is when I had the television show Latitudes and Attitudes. And Darren, my producer, was there with me with the camera. So the next day we sat down with Lynn and Larry talking about when they first got into it. And I found out something really interesting. 1967, the French sponsored a sailboat race across the Sahara Desert. It was a 3-wheeled thing with sails. And it was sponsored by the government of France to see who could sail across the Sahara the fastest. It stopped in 1967 and Larry was on that one. He didn't win, but he finished it. He sailed the Sahara. So
Completely normal. That's exactly.
Yeah,
what you
they're
would
one
expect,
step
yeah.
beyond. They do things like, here's the difference. We were doing we were both given a talk at the Prairie Schooner Association in Reno, Nevada, the sailing center of the world, right?
Mhm.
And it was billed as the Bitchin party because it was Bitchin and Pardee. And we are the antithesis of each other. I will not get on a boat unless it has an ice maker, 2 autopilots, and a water maker. They will not get on a boat that has an engine. So we are the antithesis. I mean, I am spoiled rotten when I get out there. They go out there, and she was telling me the last time Lynn and Larry sailed before he went into the hospital, they sailed back across the ocean. They stopped for 4 days in the middle of the Pacific, just put down the sails just to be there and enjoy it. They just stopped sailing in the middle of the ocean. I don't do that. So you have different drives. My drive was to get to the next place. It drove poor Jody crazy because we'd get to Naples and she'd want to, let's go in town. No, man, we made it to Naples. Now let's go down and go to Sicily. We got to go. We got to go. And she's like, no, let's stay. Let's stay. That was the biggest arguments we ever had.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's got to be an amazing thing for you, Bob, to be at that event where they're literally passing the baton. This Young Cruisers Association with thousands of members that are globetrotting all over the place, experiencing the types of things that you and Lynn and some other select sailors of your era were doing. And you were at this event last October. What was the feel like to be able to see this kind of excitement around sailing, which, to be honest, has kind of diminished significantly over the last few decades, but now it's reemerging with all these YouTubers and content creators, and you're recognized as one of the OGs, and you're presenting awards to the new YouTubers of the year. And just what's your sense of the sailing community right now compared to what it was before?
Well, I was very, very, very worried that sailing was going to gray out. And that was the discussions for years at the boat shows, because at the boat shows, everybody there was gray-haired. Everybody there was gray-haired. Starting about 8 years ago, when Jesse and Katie first started working for me, 24 years old, they had just sailed the Great Loop, and the youth was coming back. We brought them on the magazine, and the next thing we knew, our average age started going down from 65 down to 63, down to 50 something. Right now, I think you probably have the youngest audience of a sailing magazine that there is, because I'm a kid at heart. I've never grown up. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. So like cartoons and humor and every story in it was always about cruising lifestyle, about the lifestyle. We never told anybody how to set a sail. We figured it's better to learn yourself. And also, I got so annoyed at other magazines when every year they do the same story: how to set your sail, how to set an anchor. And then most of the stories were why to buy this, why to buy this. Our magazine was more, we kind of pissed off, excuse me, can I say that? We annoyed some of our readers because our advertisers, I mean, because sometimes there's a way to buy something that you don't have to get with the word marine on it, and you can save some money. We would tell people about that, the little tricks on being out there and being a cruiser. Our magazine was designed and is designed to allow people who are not rich to get into the lifestyle. All other magazines are aimed at the wealthy.
Well, and you see that reflected now in the young cruisers that are out there. These guys are getting derelict boats, spending 6 months, 8 months fixing them all up so they can go out and do some blue water cruising. And the majority of their budget is trying to fix the boat up that they get, instead of going out there buying the most high-end boats that are available, because that's what they can afford. And then they go out and have these incredible adventures and share their adventures on YouTube or whatever other platforms they're on, and have a tremendous following. And that's really where the audience is expanding so much.
Yeah, my introduction to sailing being late in life, in my 30s, first time I ever set foot on a boat, I was in my late 30s. I saw it differently than people who are born into sailing. People who are born into sailing, just it's everything's normal to them because they see it every day. But when you come into sailing late in life like I did, what I noticed around the marina was the people that I met. I mean, every afternoon when you'd finish working on your boat, you'd go up to the bar. And not all sailors are alcoholics, but all sailors go to the bar at 4 o'clock. The talk up there was so great. It made you feel so good. And you used to brag about doing stupid crap. I mean, oh yeah, I hit this pile of rocks over there. I went there 3 days later and hit the same pile of rocks. Best story you can get. If you can't get a drink with that story, and that's what it gets to. You're talking about storms. The bigger the storm, the more drinks you're going to get in a bar later. I mean, and if you ever noticed when you're sitting in a bar and the talk starts, it's always, well, yeah, this time I remember when I hit the rocks and then I had to do this. And the guy says, oh, well, yeah, well, I did, and they tell you all the stupid shit they did. That's the fun of boating.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the articles inside of the magazine were 8, 10, 12 articles that are inside of each issue right now are about the adventures that these guys are having while they're out there cruising around, whether it's the destination that they're at, or the crazy things that have happened, or the ability to cruise with their kids, their teenagers, the people that they've met, the things that they've done. And Latitudes and Attitudes is continuing that tradition that you started 25 some odd years ago. And over the last year and a half, David and I and a great staff here at Kyle Media have been trying to continue to promote those ideas, that content
lifestyle.
That people, like to really sink their teeth into. So what's your opinion on where the magazine is at now, and what direction do you see it taking in the future?
Well, I'm kind of glad. First of all, I miss it. I got to tell you, I miss the I just went to the boat show in San Francisco, and it's a very small show, very small. I missed being with the magazine. I mean, when I see a new product, I'd get excited, and then I'd realize, wait a minute, I don't have a magazine name. I can't tell anybody about this. I can, because I'm still working with you guys, but it's I don't know. I feel a little diminished by it, and I'm a little jealous that you have it. But like I said, I'm 80. You know what? Youth has to come in. You are youth, believe it or not. I see the gray, but you're still youth. You still got kids. I got great grandkids.
Yeah.
So you can take it to the next level. I started Latitudes and Attitudes in my mind while I was cruising. And while I was cruising, you have to remember, I had just sold Biker Magazine and Tattoo Magazine. In my mind, I designed Latitudes and Attitudes on the same lines that I started Biker Magazine in the 70s, and I started Biker News in the 60s. I used the same layouts, the same graphics. So here I was 27 years later, still exact same layout and design as I had on Biker Magazine 50 years ago. That's why I was really glad when you had an art director who was under 60. Imagine that, somebody under 60 doing the art. And now you have a staff. I basically did the magazine by myself with the help of Jody and my editor, because I never got out of the 10th grade. So, they have to edit what I write. But we had a staff of maybe a total of 6 people. Half of them were boat show. You've got a staff that are able to now look at the magazine and bring it into the 21st century. I took it out of the 19th century and might have got it into the early 20th century, but you've brought it now into the 21st century. And so I think it was needed in order to go on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Bob, you talk about Lats&Atts being off your plate. You miss it, obviously we're still doing some stuff together here and there, which is awesome to have you involved. But so now that it's off your plate, what are you up to? What's going on?
About 6'4", about 260.
7'4" with the afro,
which is down quite a bit, by the way.
Yes, it is.
Well, actually timing couldn't have been much better on this, because as you know, our house and warehouse is burnt down right after. Gone.
Yeah.
And so I've been rebuilding. I currently live on 40 acres overlooking a lake. And for the last year, I have been cutting trees down, over 1,000 that burned. We used to live in a forest. We now live in a burnt out forest. And then I just had my leg replaced. They take it off and they put it back and do work on it. So I just got a new hip. So I've been laid up actually for about the last 5 months, but starting to get back out there and working on the yard. And like I said, we just went to the San Francisco boat show. Yeah. I sent you a story on it. I don't know if you got it or not.
Yeah, I got it.
Very small.
You also got BobBitchin.com rolling along for you too, right?
Yeah. I got BobBitchin.com, which I'm trying to, I'm doing a podcast. My granddaughter and I are going to be doing one on adventure voyaging, basically.
Yeah.
She's a scuba diver and jumps out of airplanes for fun. I'm a sailor and a motorcyclist, so we're going to be covering scuba, jumping out of airplanes, motorcycling, and boating, basically.
What do they say about older sailors? They don't get old; they just get smaller dinghies, something like that. How's that work?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
I don't need my dinghy anymore. I'm 80. I don't have a boat. I don't need a dinghy.
Well, Bob, we want to continue to follow all that you're
especially
doing.
For the toothpaste. Yes.
I'm really trying to disrupt this conversation between you and David right now. Bob, we love you. We love all that you've been doing, all that you are doing, all that you will be doing, my friend. We are eternally grateful for the opportunity to carry on the legacy that is Latitudes and Attitudes that you've created out of just an amazing place in your heart and soul. And I can't thank you enough for the opportunity and for your time here today with us. If we wanted to find out more, get in touch with you directly, is there a good way to do that?
I'm at bobbitchin.com or bob@seafaring.com. Email.
Love it.
It's open. I deal with a lot of people. People that have questions about sailing stuff. I still like to work with them. On a one-on-one basis. It's just on emails and stuff. But no, I'm glad that you've been able to take the magazine where you've taken it, because now I get to, when I get it in the mail, I get to go, oh boy, let's see what's in here. And after 27 years of being the one putting it in there, now I get to see what's in there. I like it a lot better.
Awesome.
Well,
it's easier.
Yeah, no, I look forward to the days that I'm going to be able to do some extended cruising as well, and maybe pass this along to the next generation.
Are you coming to Bahamas?
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, so we'll be doing some sailing there.
Yeah, our share of the sail event, I think, is the first week of Bahamas, or first week in November down in the
November,
Bahamas, and we're looking at some other exotic adventures for next year as well. We're going to continue that tradition of share the sail. The readers absolutely love it. My wife and I both love to travel as well, so we will definitely be there.
Might want to get a hold of Musk so we can be the first share the sail on Mars.
You know, Elon, I got him on speed dial. He's a little busy right now, backing up DeSantis. So
I figured he had to loan you the money because you know you bought the magazine for so much money. You know, I figured he had to loan it to you.
Well, you do own Northern California now, which is nice. I'm sure you enjoying that. Bob, thank you, my friend. I appreciate your time as always. Anything we can help with anytime, let us know. And I just want to close by thanking all the listeners and readers of Latitudes and Attitudes. You guys are you are the rocks. You're the one that make this happen. And we appreciate your readership and all that you've been doing for the Bitchin family over the years and now the Kyle Media family. So thanks, guys. And we'll look forward to the next podcast as soon as we can get it out.
You got it. Have fun.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
My mind is made up. I'm gonna sail away. Latitudes and attitudes will help me find my way with my loving cup. A little salt and a